So, man, I mean, this is one of the most popular anime out there. It is huge. It's got a very, very good reputation, a huge fan base, and that meant I had very high expectations. But I am happy to report that after seeing the first season of Attack on Titan, I am included in that fan base and I'm very much enjoying it indeed. I have plenty to say. I hope you enjoy. This is my review of Attack on Titan Season 1. Let's go. So the basic premise of Attack on Titan, you probably know it already, but I'm going to go through it very quickly just in case you don't. You have these huge lumbering titans who are sort of wandering the earth. And as a result of these titans existing, humanity has been forced to retreat behind 3 concentric rings of walls. Wall Sina, Wall Rose and Wall Maria they're called. And of course one day the titans manage to break through these walls and all hell breaks loose basically. And humanity needs to defend itself against these massive titans, otherwise that is it. They're going to be gone. Humanity's last stand as they are sort of penned in like cattle, as Eren describes it. And Eren Yeager is the sort of young lad who is desperately trying to kill all the titans, and that is who the story revolves around, mostly particularly at the beginning anyway. Now, what was my enjoyment of Season 1 like? Well, here's the thing. I enjoyed it from beginning to end, but certainly at the beginning, the sort of first, I would say sort of 7 or 8 episodes, I would say I thought it was good. I was enjoying it, but I didn't see why people thought it was amazing. I just thought it was good. I thought the animation was cool. I enjoyed the fighting. I liked the look of it. I liked the music, and we'll talk about all that stuff later. But I didn't see why it was amazing. And there is an event, and I won't talk about this event now. I will talk about it later in the non-spoiler section. But there is an event that happened, and an episode that happened, and suddenly the switch just flicked in my mind, and I suddenly realised I now understand why people love this so much. And I became really, really invested in it. And from that point onwards, every episode, my enjoyment just went up and up and up. And I thought, by the end of the series, this is amazing. I totally get why it has a huge fan base, and I have plenty of good things to say about it. So my advice is, although there is certainly plenty of action in the first half of the series, stick with it, because the more you stick with it, the more you'll enjoy it. And I just think it's an absolutely amazing. I think it's really good. So what do I think is so amazing about it? Well, let's talk first of all about the Titans themselves. Now, I think the Titans are really well designed because they're not all identical. They don't all look the same. There are bigger ones, there are smaller ones. They're quite interestingly designed. And what I think is cool about them is that they don't necessarily move in the way that you would expect to. You know, they sure are big lumbering beasts, but there is quite a variety to their appearance and movement. And actually, what is quite clever about it is there is sort of a horrific way, a horror-like facet to how some of them move, in that it's not necessarily the speed of them, but the sort of weird contortions and body movements and the sort of out-of-control, limb wildly swinging around movements of their body, which is really well animated and well done. You know, and that makes them a million times scarier. Sure, they're giant people-eating machines, but that's scary enough. I get that. But actually, making the way that they move quite interesting and creepy. There is certainly a creepy element to them, which I think is very, very cool indeed. So I really like the animation, and the animation is just great anyway. I'm not hugely into fighting stuff. I've said this before in reviews of anime, that long, protracted fighting scenes don't really interest me too much. But first of all, there is plenty of plot, character development, cool dialogue that really sort of pads out the violence. And the violence is necessary. It is a violent, action-packed anime. That's what it's about. It's people versus titans fighting it out. And that's what's required of the anime. I think that first of all, the plot very much supports the violence, and also the animation on the action scenes is so well done, so interesting, so unique, that actually it doesn't really matter if there's a long fighting scene, because even I, someone who isn't particularly interested in that kind of thing, was actually engaged by those scenes. And I think what's really cool about it, you see this in the opening song, for example, the way they fight the Titans is really cool. It's basically like kind of a bit like Assassin's Creed in a way. It's sort of jumping from building to building, a bit of Spider-Man in there as well, with the sort of long strings that they use to propel themselves forward. It's a very interesting way of fighting. It isn't just boring hand-to-hand combat or the same stuff we've seen in anime a million times. It's very interesting. There's large groups of people working together in teams to try and take down these titans, and it's very, very cool indeed. Although I would generally say Attack on Titan is for people who enjoy a lot of violence and that kind of thing, I think that even people who are less interested in that and more interested in plot will find plenty to enjoy about this series, so I wouldn't let that deter you specifically. What I will say about the Titan appearances is that although they are very interesting, and although they are very creepy, and I've already given them credit for that, although I am very complimentary of that, every now and then, there is a random Titan that will come on screen that moves so weirdly, that moves in such a strange way that is actually almost funny and takes me out of the moment. Now, I've actually seen Season 2 and 3, and I'm not going to give any spoilers here, I'll do reviews of them in the future. There is a Titan, specifically, I'm not sure if he's in Season 1, but he definitely is in Season 2. And this isn't a spoiler, so I will show him on screen right now. And he's not a particularly important fella, but just look at him. He looks so strange. He looks so strange, and to the point where it's just funny. And there are serious moments every now and then that are partially ruined by a Titan that looks so utterly ridiculous that it draws me out of the moment. Now, this is very, very rare. And out of every 100 Titans, maybe there is one, maybe even one, that I think is a bit stupid. But every now and then, I just thought it was a funny note to make that there is the odd Titan that just looks so bloody stupid that it does take me out of the moment. But hey, maybe that's a bit of light relief. Fair enough if that's the case. I'll stand down on that one if that's the case. Now let's talk about something which pretty much everyone knows Attack on Titan for, and that is music, particularly the opening song of the first one. The first opening song is very, very well known. It's absolutely amazing. It gets you hyped up. It's great. The second OP is great as well. In fact, all the other OPs are great for the other series, although I won't be giving anything away, of course. It's very, very dramatic. It hypes me up like nothing else does, and I quite often listen to the music while I'm at the gym or that kind of thing, because it does hype me up in a way that nothing else quite does. It is really cool. It's quite unique as well. I think it's Linked Horizon that does all the songs, so very much like the music and the animation. They're two big parts of anime, and they really, really did nail that indeed. Now, what I will say about Attack on Titan, and this becomes increasingly prevalent as each series goes on, but it is even relevant in the first series, is that there are a lot of characters, and there is a lot going on. There is different sort of elements of the army, there's so many characters. Now, they do get introduced slowly across a long period of time, and the series does well in the sense that it doesn't just introduce everyone instantly. It couldn't. It would be utter madness. But I don't think I've seen many shows, anime or non-anime, with the sheer amount of characters and different people. It's huge. And that's great in the sense that it's great for world building, and it's not just like 2 or 3 people. This is literally the whole of humanity fighting against Titans. Of course there are going to be a lot of different people involved in that, and that's great. But what my advice is that you really have to be on the ball of noticing people and trying to remember names and trying to remember motives and all that. I would say one slight criticism of Attack on Titan, as I say, it becomes increasingly prevalent, is that every now and then you do just need someone to sit back and say, wait a minute, who are you again? I've forgotten who you are, because I've had about 50 characters introduced to me and I'm not exactly sure who you are. Now, in general, they actually done a very good job of explaining who is who and so on and so forth. But yeah, you really do have to be on the ball, because even characters who you think, oh, well, that's just an insignificant background character, later on probably isn't an insignificant background character. Everyone has a very fleshed out story. Every character is very, very deep, and there's a huge amount to take in. So although the plot itself isn't necessarily too complicated, there's so much going on, there's so much you have to remember, you do kind of have to be on the ball. And also, not only with the characters, but actually also of the world itself. And this was actually something that confused me a little bit more, is there are a lot of place names, there's a lot of geography. It's important to know where certain cities are, for example, because sometimes they'll just say, oh, we're heading towards here, it's on the north sector of the Wall Senior, and I'm like, wait a minute, which one's Wall Senior again? Which one's Wall Maria? And it's important that you know the world, because the world building is so important, and it's so intrinsic to the sort of tactical decisions made by the people fighting the Titans. Not a major criticism at all, and I still, despite the enormous amount of characters and places, I still do understand the plot, and I think it is very well explained considering how complicated, detailed and expansive it is. And the last thing about characters is that I think that it's quite a sort of wide range of characters. I think that, for example, Armin is quite an interesting character because he isn't necessarily the strongest person or the best fighter or whatever, but this is about tactics as much as pure brute force. It isn't just about who's the best fighter. It is about using tactics, about using your brain to try and maintain the survival of humanity. And I thought he was quite an interesting character. I do like it when someone comes along and maybe it isn't all about being the best fighter and being the strongest person and so on and so forth, but actually it's about using your brain, and it's sort of a battle of wits. And Armin is a good example of how Attack on Titan is clever. It isn't just mindlessly fighting titans. It isn't just the same thing over and over again. Oh look, there's a titan, let's kill it. It's actually so much more sort of tactical nuances to it that makes the show very, very interesting. But anyway, I think that's all I've got to say that is non-spoiler related. There isn't a huge amount spoiler related that I actually have to say about Season 1. But yeah, if you haven't seen Attack on Titan, just stop the video now and watch it and then come back to it. But if you have seen Attack on Titan, continue watching because there's just a couple more things I have to say. So, I'll see you in a second. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the moments which increased my enjoyment of the series so much more. The turning point, the point where the switch was flicked and I realised, okay, this is so much more than just mindlessly killing titans. And that was the point where really it was revealed that Eren Yeager was in fact a titan. Yeah, that's a bit of a spoiler, so hopefully you've clicked off by now. Once you realise that actually there is the potential that titans aren't just mindless giant zombies, but actually potentially there are humans controlling them, and that Eren is so much more than just a kid who's hungry to kill titans, that was when I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. It isn't just mindless killing. This series has some depth to it, and there is a lot more going on here than I first realised. And it's quite a shock. I didn't expect... First of all, I had no idea. I had no idea that the Titans would be humans. That's not something that even crossed my mind. Maybe it should have, but I thought that was very well done. I had no idea. And the first moment when Eren comes in... Well, we don't even know it's Eren at that point, but a Titan comes in and starts attacking other Titans. You're so confused. You're like, what's going on? I have no idea. This is absolute madness. That's great. And the plot and the characters become so much more deep. You don't know what's quite going on, and there are so many more questions thrown out there into the open, which makes it so much more watchable in the future. So that was the moment that really changed the series for me. Now, I'm going to end actually on the spoiler section with a little bit of a slight criticism. This isn't a massive criticism, but I think most people will probably agree with this. And that is that I thought it was a little bit of a shame that it was so obvious who the female Titan was. Now, maybe to some people it wasn't obvious who the female Titan was, but I worked it out pretty quickly. And for a series that holds a lot of surprises, that comes in with a lot of bombshells like Eren's a Titan, oh, maybe Titans are controlled by humans, maybe Titans are fighting each other. For a series that likes to drop lots of bombshells and you have no idea where it's going next, I thought it was a little bit strange how obvious it was the female Titan was Annie Leonhardt. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I very quickly realised. The main reason, and the first reason, is the female Titan looks like Annie Leonhardt. You know, the reason why Eren's Titan, I think, is so much better designed is that you can't tell instantly that it's Eren. Because I had no idea it was Eren until literally I saw his body lying there inside the Titan. I had no idea. With the female Titan, it does kind of look a bit like Annie Leonhardt, and actually, it's so obvious that Mikasa later on says, actually, the Titan looks a bit like Annie Leonhardt. So even the anime itself recognises that the Titan looks like Annie Leonhardt, and I just think maybe if they had redesigned it slightly so that it was a little bit less obvious, it would have been a bit more of a shock. There were several other reasons as well. For example, out of the original squad that were training with Eren, Mikasa, and Armin, she is one of the few characters, Annie Leonhardt is one of the few characters that actually doesn't come into the scouts and just sort of wanders off. She's there, and then she just disappears. And that's fine, because she goes into the police thing, the police squad or whatever, which is fine. But it was like, okay, so I'm trying to work out who the female Titan is. It's obviously a person, because we now know that people are controlled. And I'm thinking, okay, well, it can't be like someone like Mikasa or someone like that, because they're there, they're fighting the female Titan. They can't be in two places at once. And it just all added up that Annie was basically one of the only people that didn't join the scouts, and therefore wasn't in the second half of the series when Levi got introduced. And therefore, maybe if they'd had a couple more people that weren't in it, or maybe if they had just kind of made it less obvious that Annie had disappeared and now conveniently there's a female Titan which we've never seen before, everything added up a little bit too easily. And the final clue was, and this was quite a big clue, this was the moment I was like, okay, it definitely is Annie Leonhardt, is that when Eren is fighting the female Titan uses the exact same move that Annie Leonhardt used on Eren in the training bit at the beginning. And that was a little bit too obvious, in my opinion. I was completely like, okay, definitely is Annie at this point. Because they made a big emphasis on Annie's move originally, and then the female Titan does it again, and I'm thinking, okay, well, there's a correlation here. So I think there was maybe one too many clues that Annie Leonhardt was the female Titan, and what that meant was there was absolutely no suspense when they eventually catch her and Eren defeats her in the city of Trost, I think it was. I think it was Trost. There was no suspense of, oh, who's it going to be? It got revealed it was Annie Leonhardt, and I was like, yeah, okay, well, I kind of guessed that. Now, I'm not saying that massively impacted my enjoyment of the series. In fact, it really didn't. But I think that it just would have been more interesting if it was like a complete shock. Much like how it was a complete shock that Eren was the sort of rogue Titan that was attacking the other Titans. That was a huge shock. I wish the female Titan had been exactly the same amount of shock, but unfortunately it wasn't quite. So that's pretty much all I've got to say about Attack on Titan Season 1. Like I said, I've watched Season 2 and Season 3, so I will be making reviews on them very, very soon. But I love this series. I think it's really, really great, and I can't wait for the final series to come out. It's going to be really, really good. So thank you very much for watching. I'll be back with more reviews and analysis very, very soon, and I'll see you around.